I'm Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic. Welcome to Common Solution Workshop. This is step 12. So of course, I'm going to start off with a cool story. This is one I heard a long time ago. My grand sponsor, he was a big old Loki guy. He used to tell this story. And there's a man that's up in a hot air balloon, and he gets lost. And he's like, I don't know, nowhere. He's like, he spots this man below and yells out, "Can you help me? I promised a friend I would meet him, but I don't know where I am." And the man says, "You are in a hot air balloon hovering about 30 feet above ground. Your latitude is 42 degrees north and longitude is 58 degrees west." The man in the balloon says, "You must be a sponsor." He goes, "And I am," replies the man on the ground. "How did you know?" He says, "Everything you have told me is technically correct, but I have no idea what to make of your information. And the fact is, I'm still lost." The man on the ground says, "You must be a sponsee." "That's right," replied the man in the balloon. The sponsor replies, "You do not know where you are, who you are, or where you're going. You have made a promise that you have no idea how to keep, and you expect me to solve all your problems. The fact is, you have the same problem you had except now it's someone else's fault." I always like that story. So, there's an ancient Chinese proverb. It says, if you want happiness for an hour, take a nap. If you want happiness for a day, go fishing. If you want happiness for a year, inherit a fortune. If you want happiness for a lifetime, help somebody. So if you go to page 132 of the big book, it's just one sentence. And it's so straightforward. It says, we have recovered and have been given the power to help others. Here's the thing. We've always had the power. We've always had it. Maybe we've been searching for, we've had. Let's go to page 20. We're going to look at a couple quotes in here. Our ex-lives as ex-problem drinkers, that's a recovered alcoholic, depend on our constant thought of others and how we meet their needs. So remember step 10, the directions of step 10, after it talks about asking, making amends quickly and all that, it says, it asks us to turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Just another aspect of how may I serve thee. So we go from this self-centered, egotistical person driven by misdirected instincts to how may I serve. That's a 180-degree turn. It's called a shift. And so when that shift occurs to serving others, offering and giving, so when a shift occurs to serving and offering and giving, compassion will eradicate the ego. Meaning, when you help others, you remove ego from edging God out to being more like God. So when you shift from, what's in it to me to how can I help others, the possibilities become endless, because what you discover is the real you. That's all you've discovered. It's not a new you. It's not what you weren't. It's who you are. So we work on ourselves in order to help others. But we also help others to work on ourselves. That's the whole essence of this. The one thing with the steps we discover is that we're a lot of us have had low self-esteem at times. And that low self-esteem will carry over into sponsorship. And, oh, I can't do that. I'm not ready. I can't make amends. I can't do it. There's nothing on this planet that will help you get past low self-esteem than esteem will wax. So here's the thing. It's carrying the message is the greatest love you could give a person. It's called altruism. And what altruism, it's the core aspect of numerous spiritual traditions, but it comes from a Latin word that means Atari, almost like the game system, which means other people or somebody else. But what altruism is the practice of concern for the welfare of another or others. But it's the opposite of selfishness, which is concerned mostly with my own needs and little concern for others. Therefore, altruism must mean tending, mostly with the needs of others, with little or no thought of my own needs or interests. And the altruism, it's about being morally obligated to the benefit of another without comprehension of, you don't think about what you're going to get back from it. The concern for the welfare of another is what it's about. So when that point is reached, it's not what's about you anymore, it's about another and others. So when we give to the powerless, to the weak, to the helpless, to the lost, to the desperate, we're no longer prisoners of our own thoughts. And the steps are simply a journey to becoming altruistic. If the third step prayer ends with, take away my difficulties, the victory over them, may witness those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. That I can help of your power, God's power, that I can help of God's love and God's way of life. In steps 4 and 5, we discover how selfish we are. In 6 and 7, we let God remove that selfishness. The 7th-step prayer, closes with similar, that to remove we're asking to remove every aspect of defect of character which stands in my way of usefulness to you and my fellows. Take away, grant me strength to go out from here to do your bidding. He's asking to remove what stands between you and others. God's bidding is God's work. Carrying the message, these prayers are telling us we need to be maximum service to God and the people about us. Right? And I said this before, in step 3, it says that God will provide if we get close to him and perform his work well. God provides, right? And how it says, as long as we keep close to him and perform his work well. So we keep close to God by doing 10, 11, removing stuff and spending time with what we're left with in step 11. Step 12 is giving it away, right? Just doing God's work, performing his work. And there's no way of performing God. I mean, doing God's work sounds hard, but doing God's work well, the steps is like every time, boom. And the aspect of it is God first, others second, my needs get met. And this is not a selfish program. Let's go to page 14 and see. People will say that all the time, and it's complete BS. It is not a selfish program. Selfishness doesn't, I don't want selfishness anywhere near my program. It'd be like if I had a crystal clear swimming pool in the backyard, and I said, well, a little dirty water won't hurt. No, that's not. I want it always to be clean. Page 14, my friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Faith without works was dead, he said, and how abundantly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others. So he tells us right there, how do we perfect and enlarge our spiritual way of life? Through work and self-sacrifice for others. Because he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not do the work, he would surely drink again. And if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it's just like that. This does not sound like a selfish program. This is a selfless program for very selfish people. It just turns lost souls into altruistic beings, like I said a minute ago. I'm going to read a quote by Bill Wilson from 1961. And this is much deeper than what we read in the big book and in Bill's story. This is when he, after a spiritual experience, the first thing that really sinks into him, oh, wow, this could be a whole movement. In the wake of my spiritual experience, there came a vision of society of alcoholics. If each sufferer were to carry the message of the hopelessness of alcoholism to each new prospect, a chain reaction could be set in motion, forming an ever-growing fellowship of alcoholics whose mission would be to go and to visit the caves of the still suffering and set them free. As each dedicated himself, carrying the message to still another, and those released to still others, such a society could pyramid to tremendous portions, chain style, each transmitting his experience to others. It could reach every single alcoholic in the world capable of being honest enough to admit his own defeat. So a big influence, as we know, on the steps was Oxford Group. And the fifth tenet of the Oxford Group was to keep the conversion experience real by carrying Oxford Group message of salvation to others. And that was like what you got from membership. And you know, you had to believe in God to kind of become a member of the Oxford Group, but the other thing you got for full membership, where you could speak and hold positions, was you start bringing this message to the people. So our original 12th step had said, having had a spiritual experience result of this course of action, we try to carry this message to others, especially alcoholics, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Bill had big visions for this, especially alcoholics, right? You want to carry it to everybody. The problem was not everyone was having this white light experience like Bill had, this sudden overwhelming shift in the God consciousness. Most were having a gradual shift in the God consciousness, spiritual awakening. So when it was rewritten for the second printing, not the second edition, the second printing, this is what we got. I'm going to put it up on the wall. It says, having had, so they're telling you, having had, something's happened. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. So the biggest misconception that spiritual awakening happens as soon as you start at 12. It's happened way before that, having had a spiritual awakening. So step 12 covers all the bases to always perfect and enlarge our spiritual life. I mean, the first part tells us that we've had some type of conversion, right? That means at some point during fourth night, we had an awakening to turn the power on, so to speak. Now we must improve relationship with that power. We do that in step 11. The second part of 12 says we tried to carry this message to others. Of course, that's step 12, right? I mean, the essence of sponsorship. And the third part, and this is the one that's very important, it says practice these principles in all our affairs. Practice means to do something over and over and over again. I mean, baseball pitchers don't go and play first base at practice. They practice pitching over and over again. You know, Mahomes, the quarterback of Kansas City, doesn't play wide receiver at practice, right? He practices quarterback. Do the same thing over and over again. That's what we're doing here. Practice this. I'm going to show you guys something that's very cool. Oh, wait a minute. I got to bring it to a single. There it is. It's called a three-legged stool. So a three-legged stool, here's what's interesting about three-legged stool. It can hold a lot of weight on it because the legs are kind of bent out, and there's one, so three legs, right? Here's the thing, and it happens. If you take one of the legs off, it falls. You can't stand on one or two, it has to be all three. And then what happens is, so like the first leg, I look at as, oh, what happened there? There it is. The first leg is step 10, right? If I'm not doing step 10, the stool falls over, right? If I'm not doing 11, the stool's going to fall over. If I decide I don't want to sponsor, I don't know about that so much, I'm just going to the stool, falls over, right? And sadly, most people won't sponsor, which means the stool does not have its full power it can have. It's incomplete. If I'm a sponsee or a friend, it's not about doing one of I tell them it's not about doing one of these. It's about doing all of these. It's the recipe. And so what do you get for that? You get wholeness. You get completeness, right? And that's the aspect. That's the 3 steps of spiritual progress, 10, 11, 12. And I said this before, 10, 11, 12 are all about repetition, repeating the same action, that practice I talk about over and over again to get the exact same results, right? And as I said earlier, step 10, as I said before, is about doing 14 in a single package, right? Except these principles now, they don't have numbers to me, 10, 11, 12. I mean, like all broken. If you break down step 10, inventory, discussing the other, letting go, all that stuff, it's not 4 through 9, step 10. It's not prayer meditation. It's not step 11, it's prayer meditation. Let me explain it in a better way. So when it comes down to it, what we really have is eight daily principles for spiritual progress. The first one is inventory. The second one is discussing with another. The third one is letting it go. The fourth one is making amends. The fifth one is turning my thoughts towards someone I could help. Now we enter step 11. The sixth one is asking, praying. The seventh one is listening. And the 12th one, the 8th one, the last one is sponsoring. Right? Very simple. Very simple. And that's the aspect. That's how simple this is. It's not, we're not trying to do rocket science here or anything like that. If I'm not sponsoring, I'm not doing these steps, is what it comes down to. If you have the willingness to sponsor and you want to sponsor, your heart's in it, that's great. But to truly understand these steps, you're going to want to bring the message, and that's the mentoring. When you mentor someone else, and bringing the message is still suffering. So what does being a sponsor, I call it step guide, do for us? Let's go to page 89. Page 89, practical experience. Now, another word for practical would be like every day, right? Is another word for practical. Shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intense work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion: carry the message to other alcoholics. Always remember, it's not about the messenger, it's about the message. A lot of people want to make it about, oh, I'm this great big book guy and I'm this and this. It's always the message. I've seen so many guys go back out who are really good sponsors, but they went back out. One of the reasons they did, because they made the message, they made themselves the messenger instead of the message. It's always about the message, not the messenger. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. Life will take on a new meaning to watch people recover. So he just said, think of that for a second. He just said we're very ill. Now he's saying we can be restored to health. He says in a short breath, remember we're very ill, and to watch people recover. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch their own advantage, to see a fellowship grow value. And that's a fellowship of the Spirit we're talking about. To have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. So if a person said to me 25 years ago, right, 3 years before I got sober, that the bright spot of my life would one day be hearing, a person's fifth step, story for 7 hours or longer, I would think you're absolutely crazy. Hell no, that's not me. Because my whole life was driven by ego. My only motive was to get what I want, what I need, and I didn't care who I ran over to get it. And I had zero interest in other people, unless they, wanted to buy something from me, or they had something I wanted. My life today is like an anomaly. An anomaly is something that is not supposed to happen. Or was it? Maybe the anomaly was the using person. But, it's, for me, helping others is still an idea of this anomaly. I can't believe it. I go from a hopeless, alcoholic, dope fiend guy to helping people. And that's the thing, is this big book, people always say, working with, like when I've done this workshop before, and people say, how come you don't, go to working with others so often in this? Because working with others is just how to get the guy, it's like pulling the fish out of the pond, right? This is, and they go, well, where's the manual in here how to sponsor? The whole book is. The whole book is the manual how to sponsor, because the big book references 123 times in the first 88 pages sponsoring, working with other people. So let's take a journey through those other pages really quick. Let's go to the forward to the first edition. Forward to the first edition. It says to show other alcoholics precisely, second sentence from the top, to show other alcoholics precisely how we recovered is the main purpose of this book. So here's the thing. You got your book in your hand. Who's it for? I thought it was for, mine was for me. It's not. It's for the person you will take through the steps. Because when you do the steps, you don't have to understand them. You just follow that guide. It's like being sponsored by somebody. It's almost like sitting in the passenger seat of a car. You don't have to know how to get there, but you'll arrive, right? And you don't have to understand the steps. But eventually you'll hop in that driver's seat and you'll take someone on that same ride, and you'll really know it. So how do you understand the steps? It's not reading the book 200 times. It's not going to workshops and like this. It's to understand the steps, is to take another through them. And if you never sponsor, it's impossible. You'll never fully understand the steps. It's impossible. I call it the teaching syndrome. If Frankie's a history teacher and it's his first year teaching, and we go ask Frankie, hey, what about the War of 1812? He's going to break out a book and read it to us. But if we go back and talk to Frankie 8 years later and ask about the War of 1812, he's not going to open no book. He's going to say, well, what happened was, because he's got it down, because he's taught it a bunch of times. How do you think I know this stuff out of here? Not from book studies, but from taking people through it. And we tighten it down during book studies and stuff, but you get to know this book by taking someone through it. Forward to the second edition, XVI. This seemed to prove that one alcoholic could affect another as no alcoholic could. It also indicated strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to, look at this, permanent recovery. What's a vital sign? It shows that you're alive, right? So they're saying, another word for vital is essential. It's essential to permanent recovery, right? It's essential. People always want to turn long-term recovery, permanent recovery. Let's go to Docker's opinion, XXV. Says, where it says in the course, in the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. As part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to other alcoholics, and pressing upon them, they must, there's one of the musts in the book, do likewise with still others. This became the basis of rapidly growing fellowship of 100 men and women and their families. This man and 100 others people appear to have recovered. The basis of the fellowship today is not what they're saying here. The basis of the fellowship today is a bunch of people getting together trying to have an hour of freedom from the world. What's the basis of your recovery? So passing on the same spiritual ideas to another and to another was a basis of their fellowship. And I mean, what's the basis of your fellowship, your recovery? Is it meetings? How many fifth steps have you heard? How many have you led a spiritual awakening? I had a guy ask me that one time with like a little over a year, and I had heard a couple of fifth steps, and he's just like, what do you know? How many fifth steps you heard? And I was like, so pissed off. I'm like, what does it matter? And about 5 years later, so I realized how much it mattered, because it made my recovery. It was like hearing fifth steps, but after you hear so many of them, and I mean 6 or something like that, it's like all of a sudden you're plugged into a whole different universe. Like you totally get to know, you think you know inventory, now you truly know inventory. It's like complete circle. That's why it says in the 12 and 12, until we talk to complete candor of our conflicts with another, talk to our complete conflicts with another and listen to someone to the same, we still didn't quite belong. So as important for you to hear a fist is to do your own, right? It's the missing link of it. Go to page 18. And look at this one. Here's that ex-problem drinker guy again. But the ex-problem drinker who has found the solution, that's why he's an ex-problem drinker, right? Who has properly armed with facts about himself. What facts? Mental obsession, physical allergy. Can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Remember Bill and Bob? Bill goes to talk to Bob. Dr. Bob says, you got 5 minutes. And it turned into 5 hours. And Dr. Bob says he was the first actual human being that talked to him about alcoholism from actual experience. He had never heard the stuff Bill said before. And no one, this guy was a doctor. Until such understanding can be reached, Lord, nothing can be accomplished. So there's a lot that do not do that, when they sit down and then they take them to the steps. Very thorough aspect of step 1, the allergy obsession. The person needs to sit, once they sit there and they get the allergy, but then they get the pain, the obsession is to us, the pain we feel of wanting to go, our body feeling sick from it, and I'm going to treat it with more dope or alcohol, right? That's like having a broken arm and I'm going to feel better by breaking the other arm, hitting yourself in the head to get rid of the headache, right? I want people to have a first step experience and really get this and say, that's me. Page 87. This book has about a few times where they talk about the, how do I want to say, praying for others. Check this out, page 87. We ask, so we pray, we pray, especially for freedom from self-will. Remember what third step prayer says, relieve me of the bondage of self, freedom from the bondage of self. And that we are careful to make no requests for ourselves only. We may ask, we may pray for ourselves. However, if others should be helped, I never heard of that. I thought you're supposed to pray, that I'm going to win the lottery, or I'm going to, get that inheritance, or I'm going to, win that football pole. But it says we are careful to never pray for our own selfish ends. Many of us have wasted a lot of time doing that, and it doesn't work. The big book, like I said, it talks a lot about praying in here, like direction, guidance, inspiration, and strength, things we pray for. But then we have praying for others. And I thought, a lot of us thought it was about making demands. That I used to think that's what prayer was. I didn't know. I didn't really pray as I got older, teenage years, as I got away from it. But it was like, if you ask me, what do we do in prayer? I think you make demands that, what you need. You pray for what you don't have. The big book taught me to do the opposite, praying for my usefulness to others. What can I do for others? Bring me to the man who's still sick. 97. Remember the arch that we covered and the 12th one that goes down the bottom, the foundation stone? Helping others is the foundation stone of recovery. A kindly act once in a while isn't enough. You have to act as a good Samaritan every day. You know the story of the Good Samaritan in the Bible, right? The man that helps the person, right? If need be, act as a good Samaritan every day, not just once in a lifetime. It may mean a loss of many nights' sleep, great interference with your pleasure, interruptions to your business, interrupted your family events, interrupted to your kids' sports games, interrupted and all that stuff. It may mean sharing your money or your home, counseling frantic wives and relatives. I don't have to do that too much, but once in a while. Immutable trips to police courts. We've been there. Asylums. We call that detoxes now. Hospitals. We call those rehabs now. Jails. maybe a silence, maybe 5150 word. Your telephone may jingle at any time of the night. That happens. Your telephone, I have worked with guys, as someone the other day. Remember when the 49ers in the Super Bowl a couple years ago, I missed the entire almost fourth quarter because the guy called me in the middle of it because he'd done his fist up to me 2 days prior, and he goes, I got some more stuff I need to tell you now. And I was like, okay, I didn't even think about it. So I worked with guys on Super Bowl Sundays before because they come first. I made that commitment. Either I mean what I say in the third step prayer, or I don't. Even on it's happened on Christmas Eve. I've left the dinner table. My wife, I'm blessed with, that has never questioned with me working with a guy. She even tells me, you need to go here at fifth step. You're acting like a jerk. Because she knows what I'm going to get out of it, and I get back. And I've given people rides that, many rides of detoxes in the middle of the night. But the coolest thing is walking into a room, and one of the coolest things, walking in a room and seeing that sponsee taking out to the steps and kind of doing the same mannerisms that you did with him. And when I look it in the eyes and say, thank you, the truth is no, thank you. That's what I say to them, because they help me more. And that when that the light that is now lighting their eyes is the same light that that's the compassion. You both know it. Go to 102. And I love this one because this describes a lot of places I used to go to. It says, your job now is to be a place where you may be of maximum helpfulness to others. So never hesitate to go to the most sordid spot, go anywhere you can be helpful. You should not hesitate to visit the most sordid spot on earth and such an error. And I've been to those places, dirty rehabs. Keep on the firing line of life with these motives. God will keep you unharmed. I said I'd gone to dirty rehabs before because I went to all those dirty rehabs before. I grew up with those people. I'm not going to go to these $100 million rehabs to try to sponsor. First of all, I'm not going to let you in the door, but I'm not going to relate with all those people there. Just me. I like the guys that came from the place I went. But I started working with others when I had about 4 months of sobriety, and I never looked back. I spent 50 days in rehab almost, and then doing it for, kind of dicked around a little bit till I got on the steps. But when, the one thing I said when I got sober is I never want to go into a rehab ever again. I never want to see a detox. I don't want to see a jail ever again. And 22 years later, I spent a lot of time at rehabs, detoxes, and jails, even gone into prisons for some stuff, because I have a valuable message to carry. Go to page 124. Especially like police courts. I remember doing drug court myself, and never want to see that place again. And I probably gone there. I even helped be like an assistant clerk with the drug court before when I was doing counseling. I did my internship. So remember it said, oh yeah. So anyways, page 124, cling to the thought. Now here's the condition that in God's hand, the dark past is the great possession you have, the key to life and happiness for others. With it, you can avert misery and death for them, right? Remember, it said the fourth step was the key to the future, not only mine, but others as well, right? Remember, if you hear people at meetings say, I'm going to share what, people want to screw it up, and they say, I'm going to talk about what it used to be like, and what happened and what it's like now. It's not what it says in the book. It says what you used to be, what I used to be like, what happened and what I'm like today, right? Or now. For what describes in this book, what I was like would be like on the bedevilments on 52. What happened would be the spiritual awakening on page 25, the solution. And on page 153, go there, and we're going to read to what I'm like now. This is what I'm like now for all of us here that are doing the steps. And it's just so beautiful. Then you will know, I call it the hidden 12-step promise. Then you will know what it means to give of yourself that others may survive and rediscover life. Look at that word, rediscover life. You could think revive life, whatever you want to call it, rediscover life. and look at this, we've heard this before, you will learn the full meaning of love thy neighbor as thyself. If you haven't felt that, you haven't carried the message. You might, some in here might not sponsor. And we're on page 153. If you said that, you know, if you haven't felt that, like I said, you haven't sponsored yet. And you might say, well, I felt love before. It's no, I mean, it's way deeper than that. Because you get to witness others survive and rediscover life is the most beautiful thing you could possibly be a part of. To watch, you know, their eyes open, you know, when you explain allergy, to let their hope open when you tell them that God's deep within and they've given up on God years ago, to see them change right in front of your eyes in step 5, to see the new glow in their eyes after 6 and 7, you know, to see the bounce in their step and they come and tell you all excited about making that successful amends and you see yourself back when you did that, but to witness the joy when they get to helping others. That's just the greatest thing to be a part of. So let's talk about sponsorship. The term sponsorship came from the Oxford group. So a new person was taken through what was called spiritual training, soul surgery, by an experienced member. And that was called sponsorship. The experienced members were called the sponsor. And the term sponsee never existed. The Oxford group quote I love is, walk with the new man until he knows he can be a life changer to another. Leave him so he can bring others back to God. So true sponsorship, what molded a lot of the big book and true sponsorship of what they were doing was, you can trace it back to St. Thomas Hospital in Akron, Ohio. Sister Ignatia was a no-nonsense Catholic nun, was in charge of the administration, and Dr. Bob was, of course, doctor at the hospital, and he would sneak patients into the upper ward. They weren't allowed to treat alcoholic patients, I don't think, until like 1950. Like, they didn't have to write fake things anymore. They could actually bring them in when they declared a disease. But he would sneak them into the ward, and with made-up ailments, acute, you know, gastritis and stuff like that, you know, anything to keep them in the hospital for a few days. And a member would drop them off, and that a member would come back, was the only person that could visit them during their 5-day stay, and they're only there to do one thing: take these guys who are shaking and puking through the steps as they're going through that, and accompany them to 1 or 2 AA meetings at the hospital. They can meet, and that was just meeting other members. It wasn't like a meeting like we see today, but you know, they were responsible to pick the person up and take them home. And that act was called sponsorship. And the term sponsor is not found in the big book. It was first used in literature in 1940, a pamphlet called A Manual for Alcoholics Anonymous, but it got popular in 1944 by a pamphlet that was written by Clarence Snyder, and it really took off in that, and it's called Going Through the Steps. And it's talked about the gains of being a sponsor, why we should sponsor, how to approach the person, how to tell if he's ready, you know, most important, it referred to the big book as a guide, like what pages. It's very well written. The term sponsee is not in the big book, and I'm going to be straight to the point. It's not even in the dictionary. It's not a real word. I mean, you might find it on Google or refer to AA, but then you'll see underneath is sponsee a real word? I saw it recently, but I've heard guys say that before for years. My grandsponsor used to mention that a lot. So the big book uses 4 different words to describe the person we take to the steps: prospect, candidate, protege, and friend. And I believe it kind of goes in this order. When you see a newcomer, you're in a meeting, you see a newcomer, there you have a candidate, right? You have a candidate. If they want you to take them through the steps, this is that first word, yeah, I'll do the steps. So then there's a prospect. If they actually start doing steps with you, that's when the protege comes in. But if that guy drops his guard and lets you hear his 5th step, you have a friend, because you know, that friend, you know, you create a friendship, it's unbreakable, and the 5th step is the truest forms of bond between 2 people. That's as, you know, and another term that they use is not in the big book, but it's a term they used big in those days, was pigeon. And during Bill Wilson's tour of duty in France during World War I, he was in charge of raising carrier pigeons, which were used to carry vital messages across enemy lines. They'd tie it to the leg and fly them out there. You know, the information really saved thousands and thousands of lives. You know, the tanks are coming this way, planes are going to come in tomorrow, all that stuff. And Bill told, you know, Dr. Bob, they needed a diverse system for quickly training a flock of new pigeons so they could go out and carry the message to others. And they wanted to maximize the ability to save lives. So they were being outnumbered. So that's the term they used. And Dr. Bob, you know, literally took the matter of sponsorship super seriously. And he helped over 5,000 alcoholics in a 10-year period. And he did it, you know, just because he talked about going any lengths to help another alcoholic. I'll be transparent as possible. I'm not a big fan of the term sponsorship or sponsor. I use it here because you're familiar with it. But it's like you think of financial broker or a person or organization that provides funds for a project. Kind of makes it sound as if you're taking responsibility for another person. And the reason you know, like I said, the reason I use it here is because you guys know what I'm talking about. I like to, if I want to describe it in a good way, is if you look up and describe a spiritual mentor, it describes what sponsorship is, what it should be. And it's a spiritual relationship in which a more experienced, a more knowledgeable person who helps advise, teaches, and guides a less experienced and less knowledgeable person through spiritual principles to gain the same knowledge and experience. That's a spiritual mentor. It's the development and of another person, like a guru, almost like a step guide. The person under the membership would be mentorship would be a mentee, and a mentee is guided by a more experienced person through a course of, you know, transmission of knowledge, growth, deeper understanding of life. So the goal of any mentor is for the mentee to become a mentor. All mentors have mentors. That's the most important thing. As far as this, you know, carrying, you know, being a step guide, there are principles that I've listed over the years. And so the first one is I like to call the mentoring principle. And that's to take someone under your wing. That's the mentoring principle. The second principle was the teaching principle. I mentioned it earlier, to be able to explain these steps. The third one is the growth principle. That's spiritual growth that you receive. The pillar principle. It's a pillar support that holds someone up. You know, someone we can always turn to. It's not like a, you know, support is like, oh, I need support from this person. Not that kind. It's like you're there for the person as they're going through the steps with the fifth step. 5, the influence principle. Influence is an important way of bringing motivation. You know, we want to influence another by always speaking, you know, through love and through our heart. We don't want, if we come across anything less than that, they're going to go, who's this guy? The 6 is the sixth one principle was the empowerment principle. That leads us to empowerment, which is the power within, empowerment. And the 7th one is the love principle. When we sponsor, we use our greatest characteristic, which is love. And when we sponsor, we love more and more and more. So the only requirement to, you know, to be a mentor is spiritual mentor or step guide is to have a spiritual awakening or spiritual experience to resolve the steps. The requirement is, you know, I'm sorry, the only requirement is, yeah. So the only requirement as a spiritual mentor is to take another through the 12 steps that outline in the big book. So what does guiding another through the steps really consist of? I've done a whole hour group on this before. I'm going to go really quick though. There's 10 things. 1, explanation of powerlessness, allergy obsession. 2, thorough understanding of what power is. 3, proper execution of the 3rd step prayer. 4, thorough explanation of step 4 before they write, instincts, resentments. 5, hearing the 5th step and not cutting it off. 6, proper explanation and execution of the step 6 and 7. 7, assistance with writing step 8-step list and proper execution, guidance and proper execution of amends. 8, explanation of step 10, as well as hearing continuous inventory forever from that person. 9, explanation and guidance of step 11 when they're first starting it, and being able to have that conversation with a sponsee with their understanding about it, because that's awesome. 10 is telling them it's time to carry the message, right? I mean, other things can happen. Accompany them on an amends, maybe, if they really need you to be there. If you have fear, assist them in early stages of sponsoring with pages to go over and stuff, taking them, you know, to the big book page by page if they want that. So let's see what page, go to page 74, bottom. And look what it says here. It says, we say this because we're very ancient, that we talk to the right person. Ooh, interesting. Someone that's done 429. It is important that he be able to keep a confidence. He's not going to be talking about your fifth step outside of a meeting. That he fully understand and approve what we're driving at. We're driving at a spiritual awakening. And that he will not try to change our plan. I thought that changing our plan meant my plan and his plan. No, it's the first 100's plan. We're not changing we're not changing the recipe in this book. Right? You know, changing the plan is hearing, you know, half of a fifth step saying, I've heard enough. I've heard some speakers say that, big time speakers. Changing the plan is ending the inventory. I mean, as far as checking the boxes in the inventory or telling him what stuff he needs to check, you know, writing it with him and all that. That's, you know, never put a timetable. You can never put a timetable or play God in this. You know, and you know, if there's 5 things that I would look for, or some of the things I look for, I would say in a sponsor now. If I had to get you know, a sponsor, I want that person to understand the allergy obsession from actual experience. And another thing is I want them understand of the God aspect within. And then understands the instincts that they're calling the inventory, because I know he does inventory. He does inventory regularly and has made their most difficult amends. If I get a guy that doesn't understand the allergy obsession, can't explain it, what good is he going to do to me or anyone else? If he doesn't know that God's within, then what power is he trying to loosen inside of him? He's you know, if he doesn't understand instincts or doesn't do it, he's not doing inventory regularly. So now we know what a sponsor is. I'm going to tear this apart and talk to you what a sponsor is not. Modern sponsorship. You know, I heard a guy call it the clogged toilet. I don't know what that means, but I guess you can draw your own conclusion. So I'm going to say it like this. When you see Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, depicted in TV or movie, the sponsor shows up and he's usually like a guy 6'5" or something, and he's no nonsense bodyguard types, and he shows up just at the right moment to take the drink or the alcohol, you know, or the dope out of the guy's hand. And he might even say, one day at a time, you know. Here's the truth. Is that Hollywood depiction far off? And you ask people in AA what a sponsor is, they will say the main purpose of the sponsor is to keep them sober. I've heard that at meetings hundreds of times. And the sad truth is this, is a majority of people in recovery think sponsorship has to do with taking responsibility for another person. So I'm going to tell you what sponsorship, you know, some of the sponsorship myths, we'll call them. You can't sponsor until you have 1 or 2 years. That's BS. You can sponsor as soon as you're ready to. You can sponsor with 2 months. You can't sponsor if you have less than a month. I heard that before. You can't sponsor outside of meetings. You can't sponsor a friend. You can't sponsor a family. You can't sponsor the opposite sex. You can't sponsor unless they've done the same drug. You can't sponsor until you're ready. I love that, because sponsees will tell you, I'm not ready to hear that at meetings. Don't sponsor until you're ready. No one's ready to sponsor. That's why you go do it. Here's another. How about what a sponsor is? You hear this all the time. I heard this a lot of stuff actually when I went to counseling school, and this guy was supposed to be the guru of counselors got up there and explained a lot of this stuff. But a sponsor is a friend. That can happen, not a goal. Sponsor is an answer man. A sponsor support system. A sponsor is a broker. This is what you hear. The sponsor is a problem solver. Remember, they're human, right? A panic button, like the sponsors has like some bat phone or something we call them on. The sponsor's always right, never wrong. Remember, again, the sponsor is perfect, superhuman. No. A counselor, you hear that before. It's like a counselor. It's like a therapist, a big brother or sister. A dependence. What about God? If my sponsor tells me to call him every day and I ask him, I've heard this before, when do I have to quit calling you? Well, now you're going to do it again for 6 months. Again, you're taking dependence upon God away from that person. A sponsor must, how about this one, have lots of time. A sponsor must be old. Young people in meetings, when we started young people's meetings out here, and I would go to them and I would look around the room and I would see young people ready to sponsor, but all the newcomers were getting old, these old codgers to sponsor them. I go, why aren't you guys sponsoring each other? And we made it happen. A sponsor must give the sponsees right the meetings. They must help them cope with their problems. I hear that all the time. Do whatever it takes to keep the sponsee sober or not sponsor too many. A sponsor must, I hear this a lot, sponsee must call the sponsor every day at 6:45 a.m. or else. That's from sponsoring the people. I heard this stuff. Give back to the sponsor. There's a whole thing out here where they do yard work for the sponsor. I never made my guys do that. I'm not kidding. I swear to God, it's very popular. I'd probably get chased over the hillside if I brought up in a meeting, but that's what they do. They believe in it strongly. Sponsee must call his sponsor when things go bad and talk it out. The sponsee must know the book inside out. All you need is a message, right? You don't need the book inside out. You have it. Sponsee must have the same beliefs, must go to the same meetings, blah, blah, blah. So some say sponsorship and counseling are the same. I'm going to bring this up. Oil and water. I know guys that say, I'm a counselor and I'm a professional sponsor. A counselor is a paid position in the recovery field where one teaches and counsels patients using therapy, presentation of remedies, right? Educate, call it treatment, right? Very different from being a sponsor. Not even the same ballpark. Some sponsors want to give relationship advice. I brought this up before, telling the sponsor who they should date, who they should break up with, and when they should do this and when they should do that. I mean, come on. So this person failed the relationships in the past and is going to tell them how to have one. But didn't we ask God to run our lives, not the sponsor? I don't want to run, my life anymore. Why would I run some drunks? I mean, this is all classic modern recovery we hear. And it's just our job in groups like this to tell the truth, what we see. And as I said, people believe this stuff. Sponsors seem too caught up in being this big brother or dictator. And if you're going to drink, call your sponsor. A sponsor's job is not to keep them sober. The sponsors, it's like the steps are pushed secondary. I don't even know what certain guys are doing. I mean, where in the book does it say we're supposed to be dependent upon on someone else? Thank God we're taught this stuff. Go to page 18. It says that the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, allergy, obsession, that he obviously knows what he is talking about. And his whole deportment shouts out the new project. He's a man with a real answer. Here's the part I want to cover. That he has no attitude of holier than thou. Nothing except a sincere desire to be helpful. Attitude of holier than thou is the ego. An attitude of superiority over other people. We call it also high self-esteem. Think you're better than others. I've seen sponsors talk down the sponsees and treat them like garbage. And some, yes, there's sponsors that are altruistic, many of them, but there's many that are deceiving. And I like to break them down to two separate things, either an advocate or a charlatan. So an advocate is a person who voices support for another and strives for that person's better interest. A charlatan is a person who falsely pretends to know something and it's false because they don't live it. They try to be something in order to deceive people to further themselves. So what is an advocate? It speaks slowly to lift the person up. right? Charlton says, I can't believe you drank again. An advocate eases into what the problem is, making it easier to understand it. The Charlton says, you better do these steps. And the advocate speaks with love and grace. And the Charlton speaks with the holier than thou, high self-esteem attitude. The advocate tells them the truth with love, and that Charlton tells them they are doing great when they're not. Oh, you're doing great. You know, the advocate lets the person hit bottom. The Charlton chases the person to persuade them to listen and stop using. The advocate gets mad, doesn't get mad when a person doesn't follow the steps. The Charlton fires the person when they're not following the steps. The advocate tells that the penance is always with God. Charlton insists the penance is on him and other people. The advocate runs towards the sufferers. The Charltons many times runs away from them. I've seen these Charltons out there, and they truly hurt people. I strive hopefully to be an advocate. To them, I'm always working, on me. I'm always working on myself. I've had times where people have said stuff and I realized I did some things, or said some things weren't right, maybe. But I'm not one of those drill sergeant sponsors. I don't kick a man down. That's being a bully. I was a bully at one time in my life. I don't want to be one now. Because of that, the guys I sponsor always come back. There's so many guys I sponsor and they come back. Some guys 5 or 6 times. And they always say, I know you'll take me in. And why wouldn't I? I've never fired anyone or make them dependent on me. If they're messing up, I speak, like I said, the truth with love. And love is not lying and telling a person everything's okay when it's not. It's never why I will comprehend the philosophy that I need to kick someone down. Rub salt in their wounds. Don't rub a salt in their wounds. The only time you should look down at a person is when you're lifting them back up off the ground. And many times there's no choice but to be tough. Sometimes you got to let them hit a wall. But we don't play God. And, carrying the message isn't always easy. This disease will break your heart at times. And I have had, and you get used to it after a while. I hate to say that. You first sponsor usually go back out, you're like bummed, but then you get used to it. I've had people never get through the starting gate. I've had guys do 1, 2, and 3 and just disappear. I've heard, people's 5th steps and send them to 6 and 7, never hear from them again. Some have skipped on step 9 or tap dance around 10, 11, 12, and they pick up and soon pick up again. Great people. I love them. And I pray for them still that they'll come back. Some have passed on. A guy gave me great advice one time. He said, Stephen, we're all bus drivers. Some get on the bus, some get off the bus. Just make sure you're driving the damn bus. You're always driving that bus. But here's the truth. Sponsoring may not be easy at times. It usually is. There's nothing more rewarding, because the reason is because it's impossible to hold a torch on a person's path without brightening your own path at the same time. Both paths are brightened, but it's a game changer. For me, it puts that spark in my eyes. I get excited about it. It keeps my heart lit. But it puts if there was juice in the spirituality, it's sponsorship. But I get a feeling of adrenaline when I'm working with a guy. I look forward to working with them. And there's nothing kind of like carrying a 5th step. It's like a sacred gathering to me. But the fact a person who barely knows me is going to say, I'm going to tell you something I never told anyone before. Their deepest, darkest shit. They're going to tell me that stuff. I get to be there when the light bulb goes off and they experience consciousness for the first time. Even before they know it, their eyes light up. I mean, wow. When I hear a 5th step, I'm not worried about my bills or my broken plumbing in my house. It takes the spotlight completely off of me. There's someone in this room right now will say, oh yeah, I got to do that again. That's right. That's what happens. But to me, it's one of my greatest achievements, but it's really something that was just handed to me. When we have the tools to change someone else's life, your life will never be the same. I just don't get to witness an awakening. I get to witness miracles. Go to page 15, where it says we commenced. This is underlining stuff right here. It says we commenced to make many fast friends. It says we commenced to make many fast friends, and the fellowship has grown up among us, which is a wonderful thing to be a part of. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty of life, right? I have seen hundreds of families set on their feet of a path that really goes somewhere, have seen the most impossible domestic situations rightened, feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. I have seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery, which has not been overcome among us. And Wilmerson City, and its envisions, there is 100 of us and our families. We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. So besides watching them completely turn their lives around, I mean, I've seen the reunited homes. I've watched it happen. I've seen people start a family for the first time, marriages that were over restart. Guys and women have a successful career, miracle after miracle after miracle, reconnect with their parents. Earlier today, I got a sponsor, he sent me a text with his arm around his mom. He just made amends. They haven't seen each other in years. That's just rips my heart. So we get to see, the people reach their dreams, hit their ambitions, everything they're praying for in the third step prayer, everything they're praying in the 6 and 7. I mean, that I'm a big book traditionalist, fundamentalist, I guess you would call it. I practice the programs outlined in the big book, the way the first 100 did it. And one of my focuses in sponsorship and doing book studies is to teach others how to teach the program as outlined in the big book, teach others how to teach. And meetings are filled with many suffering, untreated alcoholics, dry. And I rest easy knowing when I go to a meeting and speak the word that maybe one person has heard it. Because my goal each day is to help one person, just one. I've done my job. Same thing I do a book study. I've done book studies with 80 people in the room or more. If one person listened, I've done my job. If I've been accused of being a step Nazi, a book thumper, book humper, holy roller, step-tard, arrogant. People used to call my grand sponsor arrogant. He was like kindest person I ever met who never spoke a word about anyone. They called him arrogant because he spoke the truth. But I've been asked not to come back to meetings anymore, not to bring my big book into meetings. I said, leave your big book at home. You hold it too close. But I've been actually verbally threatened by members for teaching the steps in meetings. And never once did I ever say anything like must or anything like that. I will not change who I am because over the years, I have witnessed a fellowship grow up about me. I know what this can do. And, the first thing asked me to explain, when I met my sponsor the first time, when we sat down the first time, he asked me to explain what recovery was. And I said, when I spoke it, he goes, you don't know shit. I didn't get mad because I was willing to do anything. But he asked me a life-changing question. How good's your word? And I said, it's good. It was just bullshit. But my word was horrible. We're only as good as our word. And he said, I will hear your story, your fifth step, as long as you hear someone else's. That is the longest promise I've ever kept in my life. That day, this person offered me a lifeline, and that lifeline was the steps. And I know that big book is my life raft I tossed at as many people as possible. I keep big books in my trunk. But I learned that from the guys I was around. My grand sponsor used to have more big books in his trunk than anything else. I don't even think he kept a spare tire. But I tried to thank, this man many times for his time and his wisdom and his love he has given me. And he would just say, it's not me, it's God. This guy heard my darkest secrets and did not judge me. But he helped me work through my resentments, but just more than that, to see what created them. I got awoken to that. But he took his free time to assist me to make my difficult amends and showed me how to sponsor out the big book. But he never made me call him every day, because he did not want me to rely on him. The truth was, he was just a member of AA trying to save his own butt. And he was a perfect example of a selfless giving of honesty and love. But the first human being, other than a family member, that looked at me in the eyes and said, I love you. I was like, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to think when he said that. My guy's telling me he loves me, So that's 49 shattered the illusion of what we thought was life, and awakens us to the fact. I'm going to quote my friend Derek here: love is all we really are. And then we send that love into the world. And at that point, we discover the highest love is called agape. And it's love to love another for the sole benefit of the one being loved. And that's without consideration of their worthiness to be loved, to love all without prejudice, to love them regardless of what they've ever done. We gain all this from just taking guys through the steps and loving them, but then we look at the world in a different way. So the steps show me that love can exist in the most hostile, darkest environments. It also showed me that love is the most powerful force in this universe, because it can heal. That's what the masters taught. I mean, did Jesus teach Christianity? Did Buddha teach Buddhism? Did Krishna teach Hinduism? Did Confucius teach Confucianism? Did the Lao-Tzu teach the Tao? No, they did not. They taught the same thing, love. They taught that love is concerned in caring for others, and that we must love another as we do ourselves. That we must love the whole world, rich, poor, good, and bad. But they said things like, never leave a person empty-handed. Faith by itself and not accompanied by action is dead. We have two hands for helping others, one to help others. One hand for helping us, one hand for helping others. They also said two people are better off than one, because if one falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. And then my favorite one, we are responsible for one another. And another one was, paraphrasing on this one, you live for others and others live for you. That was the Tao. So I'm going to tell a story real quick, and this sums up this love and this altruism and everything. And maybe you've heard this story before. One day, an old man's walking down the beach, and he notices hundreds and hundreds of starfish on the beach that watch the shore. He continues watching. He sees a little boy around not as many starfish. He was picking them up and throwing them in the ocean. And the old man, inspired, started, throwing them in the ocean. They're like 300 yards away from each other. And as he gets close to the boy, he says, "Kid, there's no way we can save all these starfish. You can't make a difference." And a little boy with a smile on his face holds up the starfish, and he says, "For this starfish, it makes all the difference in the world." And he throws it in the ocean. Remember that old saying, they quote this to Bill Wilson, but it's not Bill Wilson. To the world, you might be one person, but one person, you might be the world. And that goes for anything. But the truth is, we will never really come to truly have a relationship with the power until we take another through the steps. I am convinced that, if I'm neglecting what freely is passed on to me, we lose whatever we gained. It's not about being sponsored. It's about sponsoring for permanent recovery. And the only unsuccessful sponsor that exists is someone who does not sponsor. It's not about the messenger, it's about the message. And once you have that ability to change someone's life, your life is going to be different for the rest of your life. A person asked me a long time ago, what do you do to get noticed by God? And the answer is simple. Look after those who are once as lost as I once was, and bring them the message with love and compassion. I'm going to tell a story and we'll go to a meditation. This is called the man in the hole. This guy's walking through a field and he falls into a hole in the ground. And it's about 20 feet deep, let's just say. Well, the farmer he starts, help, help. The farmer shows up and he takes a ladder and he goes, here's a ladder, and he drops down the hole, but it's only 10 feet long. Realizes he's still stuck in the hole. He sits down bottom of the hole and he's like, what the hell do I do now? Doctor shows up. The doctor says, what's wrong? And he goes, I'm stuck in the hole. He reaches into his pocket with some pills and throws them down to him. And he goes, take these. He takes those and kind of trips out for a little bit. And then he realizes he's still stuck in a hole. Starts yelling for help again. Therapist shows up. He goes, what's wrong, son? I'm stuck in the hole. And he goes, perfect. And he goes, grabs a chair and he sits down next to the hole. And he goes, tell me your life story. And when he gets to the good part, the therapist goes, the hour's up. And he runs off and leaves him. And he's still stuck in the hole. Then he starts yelling louder for help. And the town's pastor shows up. And he says, what's wrong, son? I'm stuck in the hole. And he goes, and he throws him a Bible and he says, let's start reading together. And he starts after the pastor leaves, he's still reading the Bible for some hours in. And all of a sudden he looks up and goes, I'm still stuck in the hole. Throws the Bible out of the hole. And then all of a sudden the shadowy figure appears at the top of the hole. And he looks at him and he says, I've been hearing your whimpering and you're crying and you're, making yourself a victim in this thing. You went out of the hole? And he goes, yeah. And the shadowy figure jumps down the hole with him. And the guy goes, what did you just do? Now we're both stuck in the hole. And the shadowy figure goes, I know the way out. And that's what it is. You got to have the way out. I'm going to do a quick guided meditation. Let's focus on maybe what we used to be like. I, the ego. The most selfish one-letter word is I. Everything would revolve around I. I should be loved. I should get this. I should be respected. I want this. I. Question, is your life happy, joyous, free, revolve around I? Avoid I by helping others. Unselfishly offering yourself to the hand of another. Right now, there's someone who needs your help. You might even know who it is. Think of them. Maybe they feel unwanted, unloved, hopeless, uncared for, wanting your help. They feel forgotten, waiting for a message. Perhaps they think AA didn't work for them, but they never knew the program. There's a person out there who's powerless, who's waiting for the word of what it is. Someone in doubt, waiting for the word of why they have that doubt and where the power is. There's someone just waiting for your ear or the words of hopelessness, just waiting for your time. And someone who just wants to be loved. Know this, altruism, the realm of altruism, there is no greed, only service, no hate, just love, no lies, just honesty, no resentments, just compassion, no words, no pride, only humility, and no misery, only joy, no doubt, only faith, and no guilt, just freedom. So we cannot change the way another thinks or what they choose, but we can always put a simple kit of spiritual tools at their feet, what was freely given to us. and they refuse the message we offer, even if they do not follow the lead, even if they turn away from us, we always get paid spiritually. We still get paid. If we don't, we pay the price. Why? Because we're willing to give. My grandma used to say, heroes are not made. They are born out of a selfish person who finds their way giving themselves to others. Where that person freely gave them. This is a 12-step prayer. God, as my spiritual awakening continues to unfold, give me the words to pass the message to others who still suffer. As I walk day by day on the road of spiritual progress, guide me to always practice the principles as a way of life. As I do your work that I promised I would do, I always provide me with strength to accomplish all tasks. For this opportunity of second chance of life, I am forever grateful. Amen. Next week, we will talk about it's going to be like a wrap up of recovery and talk about some really cool stuff, and you guys can come check it out. I'm going to stop recording.